Welcome to Tales About the Table, where we explore the stories, challenges, and creative chaos of TTRPGs, but mostly D&D. I'm Elijah.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Josiah. Together, we discuss the art of DMing, character building, and making unforgettable moments at the table.
Each episode, we break down a different aspect of tabletop gaming, sharing our experiences, lessons learned, and maybe a few funny failures along the way. Whether you're a seasoned DM or you're just rolling your first set of dice, there's always more to learn about collaborative storytelling.
Sometimes we talk about how to play TTRPGs, the rules, the setup, and everything in between.
Sometimes we talk about how to be better people and communicators, and therefore, better players.
And sometimes we talk about our own misadventures and the lessons that we've learned from the worlds we've created.
But most importantly, we love telling great stories together.
So pull up a chair and join us as we share another of our many tales about the table.
Hi, I'm Jack, joined as always by Elijah and Josiah, and we are going to be talking about building characters today, and specifically the story parts of building a character in Session 0 as you're sitting down with the rest of the table. We're pretty excited about this topic. All of us love to DM, love to be behind that seat, but we all love to get in the character seat as well and experience another world through the lens of somebody new that we get to create and come up with. It truly is one of the most exciting parts of D&D, and there is a reason people fall in love with this process. And we want to not pretend that we have all the right answers, the correct way to build stuff, but hopefully give you guys new resources and a new angle to look at and think about character building. As we get started, I will probably throw it over to you guys here and just kind of ask, what are some of your initial thoughts when you're sitting down to build a character? What is the stuff that goes through your head as you're getting ready to do that?
Yeah. For me, when I start and I'm sitting down for that Session 0, or sometimes even before Session 0, and I'm like, hey, I want to build a character. A lot of times I like to kind of find one thing to sort of attach to and then build a character out from there. Very recently, when I started a campaign with Jack and a couple of our other friends, I was reading through the player's handbook and I was like, ASMR are light bearers. And that was like their whole, the one thing that I attached to about this character, and I made it the character's entire life mission was to be a light bearer. And what did that mean? And over the course of time, I developed that out to be something that, okay, so he's very curious about the world and he wants to know more and more and seeks knowledge. And so that led to me picking wizard as a class, and that led to creating a character who is a little reckless and a little nerdy. And it developed a character because I latched on to one thing that I was like, this is awesome, and I would just want to run with it. And so, yeah, when I'm starting to make a character that I think that I'll be playing for at least a little bit of time, I will take something and run with it. And sometimes I find that really quickly. Sometimes that takes a long time, and I'm like, I'm not really attached to this, and I'm not really excited about fill in the blank. But a lot of times I kind of just will pick up just whatever I need to. It also, as someone who tends to be a forever DM, I love jumping into the character sheet, the character seat, and so I'm always happy to, hey, everyone else is playing a bunch of fighters. Sure, I'll play a spellcaster. Oh, everyone else is playing a spellcaster. Sure, I'll play a fighter. I am totally happy to be flexible, and so just finding something to jump in and run with is really a big thing. And then also finding characters that I can not even necessarily relate to, but that I'm like, yeah, I can roleplay this really well. That I'm like, I want to see where this story would go, where to see what this character would be like in the world. I think that's kind of the two things that I look for is would this be fun to play? and then just take something and run with it.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be super crazy in depth, and I do like building in depth characters, but out the gate when I'm first starting, that's not always my first goal.
Totally.
So
Right. I think I would say something very similar. I think like I very seldom when I am trying to build a character from the get-go am thinking, well, how can I make this the most fleshed out character I've ever built?
Mm.
Um and a lot of that is mostly because I just don't spend as much time building characters as I think you guys do. And so I do a lot of the character building as we're playing. And in and throughout our game, I spend a lot of time building out my character and figuring out where it's gonna be. I think for me, usually when I go to start making a character, uh, a lot of times it is similar, Elijah, in that I just kind of find something that like sticks out to me and then I run with it. And usually usually it's just player's handbook stuff. It
yeah.
is like going
Mm.
through, okay, what classes are there, looking through them all and looking through the mechanics until some mechanic jumps out to me and presents a good character idea. Cuz I think for me, when I think about the way that characters work in D&D, so much of it is the core mechanics of the game flowing into a character that then tells a story or some sort of narrative about a character through the lens of whether it's class, whether it's their background, whether it's some other mechanic about them. Using those mechanics, they really do sort of drive that character. And so for me, like it often uh, flows out of class or background, and I'll just sort of look through things until I see something and I'm like, "That's really fun. Let me grab that piece." And it's like, "Are you guys ready to play?" And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm gonna be a pirate. That's all I know. I have
Yeah.
my background, I have no class. I'm like, "Yep, we can go ahead and start because I'll have the rest of the character figured out by the time I need to roll dice."
Mm.
Yeah.
And definitely done
Mhm.
that before.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
that's great. Yeah, it is really interesting hearing your guys' takes on that. Like, I would think that it's not completely different, but I definitely do have a bit of a different approach. I really enjoy optimization and kind of building characters in my spare time mechanically. I really just enjoy, mechanics in general and system design and how all that stuff works. And so I enjoy putting them together like these puzzles and figuring out stuff. And I have a bit of a backlog of kind of character chassis that I could put a story into that hopefully would fit with the campaign and fit with the campaign world. Um, and so there's this place often where when I'm coming to D&D, I'm like, okay, it is I like it because it makes it a little bit more challenging instead of just drawing one idea and saying, okay, I'm going to run with this for my character. I have to kind of work within these bounds of I want to play a powerful character. I have, these powerful characters built and to varying degrees too. Some are more powerful than others, so I can plug in the ones that are a little less powerful for groups or tables that are going to work better with that. But to have some of this idea of like, okay, this type of, character lends itself to maybe more this type of story, and this type of campaign is going to lend itself more to this type of character. And be able to kind of mix and match that stuff until I get something where I'm kind of pleased with. Um, and as Elijah said, and I think both of them kind of said this, was like, you don't start out with a fully fleshed out character. You don't,
right.
your characters grow and learn as you go through the course of the campaign. And I mean, in writing, there are kind of two different types of writing. You have your outliner and you have your discovery writer. And I mean, that's overly reductive, but going along with that, your discovery writer is kind of playing D&D with himself a little bit. He's like, I'm going to discover what happens as I write, like I'm going to set forth problems, setting, issue, things that are going on in the world, and then I'm going to see how my characters react because I get into their heads and stuff like that. and your outliner is going to be like, oh man, I'm going to figure out where I want this story going. I'm going to see what's going on. Neither are right or wrong when it comes to writing. But when it comes to D&D, you pretty much are required to do a little bit more discovery than outlining. You can outline certain parts of your character, you can have ideas of where you maybe want them to go, but you have to hold that with a bit more of an open hand because you're not the only one
Yeah.
participating or writing this story. Um, and so there really is this place where you may want your character to kind of grow in a certain direction. And if you do, definitely go talk to your DM about it and see what you guys can do to kind of push the story in that direction. But at the same time, you got to be okay sometimes with your character. Maybe their journey's cut short. Maybe they die early. Maybe they're, not able to, not feeling like they're growing in the right direction. I've had characters before where it's like, oh, they're going to do this. And you start playing them. And it's like, from the circumstances and the things that are happening to them and the way they're seeing the world, I don't think they would grow in that direction. I think they're kind of heading the opposite direction. And you got to kind of work that out as you're going. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do want to hop on real quick
Yeah,
with
go
that
for
because
it.
I think that is something that like I struggle with is I'll be like, I really want them to like I am a huge fan of like you should give your character a flaw. And so like a lot of times I'll give my character one, two, sometimes three or four flaws. And I'll be like, hey, I would love for them to like get over this flaw, you know, semi quickly of like they start out like this, but they grow and like forcing your character to fix something about themselves and being like, well, maybe I should just not have had this be a flaw in the first place. Because like if your character like really struggles with like ego and then you build a super powerful character that is like wrecking people in combat and really saving the party time and time again, you're not going to have this moment where it's like, oh, I need to be like more humble and make sure that everyone is like, it's like, no, I'm keeping people safe, and if I were not super powerful they would all be dead. um that's not going to help you grow. And so I think, yeah, making sure that like when you are making a character that you're not plotting out a like arc for them ahead of time, that you're not like, oh yeah, this is gonna like this is all the things that they're gonna go through, but really to like, I'm gonna build this character with a really open hand because someone in front of me might say something that I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I would love to play off of that. Um, and the world might be created
Yeah.
after you kind of build your character. And it's like, oh, magic is not really like, it's kind of frowned upon in this setting. So I would like to also frown upon magic. And so maybe I'm not actually going to play a wizard, but to like,
Mhm.
even in the character creation process, to like have that open hand. Um, but then also just as you're going through, just keeping an open hand on your character, and really just letting the world kind of shape that, letting the dice roll as they
Mhm.
do, and having
And
those
letting your
moments
party
come naturally.
members,
Yeah,
letting your party members have a big influence and role in how your character turns
Yeah.
out. I
Yeah.
think
absolutely.
that in real life, the people you surround yourself with, you often begin to reflect. You begin to show certain parts of them, and I think that's very true about your characters in D&D as well. If you're playing with a bunch of people who often do certain morally gray actions, I think your character, even if they're Mr. Goody Two Shoes, should start to show some of that moral grayness as well. And that isn't a bad thing. You can have a whole journey where wrestles or she wrestles with, oh man, I want to be good, and yet the people, the group I'm with, the circumstances I've been put into are forcing me to wrestle with making choices that I maybe wouldn't agree with and things like that. So part of
Yeah.
the reason we're talking about this today is I actually have a bit of a system that I've created for helping me build characters that I feel like can easily start a campaign, not be too much of a spotlight hog typically, but like actually have a bit of a journey built into them, have a bit of a, the in writing you have your want and your need, and then the character's journey is often about figuring out that, oh, actually, you need this, even though you've been pursuing your want, you actually need this, and they kind of grow in that. But how to build some of that into D&D. And before we hop into it, I want to do a quick disclaimer because I think it is important. Um, we are not saying that every character needs to be this way. This is definitely more like, hey, maybe you've watched Critical Role, maybe you've watched, the Dungeon Dudes, Drakkenheim campaign, or you've watched, so many other plethora of live plays out there, and you see a character in there, and you're like, oh man, I want to play characters that are fleshed out, that have feelings and emotions and interact with the world. That is more what we're talking about here. You do not have to play this to have fun playing D&D. In fact, there are a ton of people that do not play these type of characters ever and have a blast playing D&D. And I'll kind of describe it in three ways. You have the zero-dimensional character, the one-dimensional character, and the three-dimensional character. And the zero-dimensional character is this, basically just a gimmick. And again, this is fine to play. A lot of people play this because they're not here to be an author or write a story. They're here to roll dice, kill goblins, and have fun with their friends. And to do that, you really just need a gimmick. Like, a lot of video game characters are just a gimmick. It really, there isn't a whole lot there. And to give some practical examples of this, a gimmick is something like, we were just talking about this beforehand, but Elijah saw a video of this guy building a character whose his main goal was to fit as many D's nuts jokes into it. So it was like a goblin or he had a pickaxe because he was a miner because, and so it was like, there was just a bunch of jokes embedded in that, and that is a gimmick. Like, every time this character shows up at the table, he's trying to fit his gimmick into play. It's funny. Even good characters, even three-dimensional characters, can still have a gimmick. Like, that is a part of playing at the table. It makes it easier to get into character. It makes it easier to interact with people when you have a gimmick. It's never a bad thing to have that. And another thing is the barbarian rages and kills people, like in battle. He loves to fight. That's a gimmick. The bard wants to bed people. That's a gimmick. Like, it's this, often the class stereotype is the gimmick you can kind of fall back on. And that allows you to kind of play this character at the table and have them feeling like there's something there, to interact with. The one-dimensional character, moving on from the zero-dimensional character, is somebody who has a desire. And it's typically a pretty basic desire. It is like, I want to... I actually screwed up just a tiny bit. With the barbarian, him getting angry is the gimmick. Him wanting to fight makes him a one-dimensional character. And that might even be a good transition place. Like, each class kind of has a gimmick built into it, but then there's a desire that kind of comes along with it. Your barbarian, it's like, oh, I want to get into a fight. Your fighter is like, built to do those type of things. Your wizard's desire is probably to learn or uncover things. Your rogue's desire is to steal or find treasure. Like, you have kind of basic desires that are built into each class. And that's where you get your one-dimensional characters. These are totally fine to play too. Often, most campaigns, even if you play a fleshed out character, kind of starts as a one-dimensional character. What is the one thing that they want? What is the one thing they're pursuing? Do they want gold? Do they want fame, fortune? Do they want, to find some artifact or save some princess, or prince? And I think that there's a place where that lends itself, especially at a beginning of a campaign. And both those are great and okay, but both those are also not what we're totally talking about today. What we are wanting to focus on is the three-dimensional character. And that is often where you have a character that has both a want and a need, and is wrestling between those desires and trying to come to grips with, their own philosophy of the world and what's going on. And that is where you get characters that really feel alive when you are playing them. Where you could take a personality test with them and you're like, oh my gosh, this is not me, but like real and breathing and reacts in real ways.
And the characters don't have to start there either. I think
Yeah.
that's worth pointing out as well. Like,
Mhm.
you can start as a zero-dimensional character or a one-dimensional character and build into a more fleshed out character over time. We
Yeah.
see that happen all of the time with NPCs that we really didn't care about, and then over time, we were like, "This is a character that I care about deeply and has a lot of depth," but definitely did not start that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
I
sure.
will I will put out one, like, I'll say a minor, like, warning. If you are joining a new table and you have this goal and you're like, I am going to create the coolest three-dimensional character ever, and everyone else at your table is playing a zero or a one-dimensional character, it is going to feel very awkward.
Yep.
You are going to stick out like a sore thumb. And
Mhm.
so if that is something that you want, make sure that it fits at your table, because otherwise you develop either you have main character syndrome and it's like,
Yep.
well, all the rest of us don't really have any motivation or desire or like want to do anything, but you know, Jack is constantly like, we have to go on this epic quest to save the kingdom, and it's like, well, sure, I guess if you're going, I'm going, because I don't really have like any desire or
Mhm.
motivation. It's like, well, that creates a situation where like Jack now dictates where the campaign goes, because whatever his desires are and the things that he's wrestling with, that's what he comes across. And so, yeah, I would just say like, I I think three-dimensional characters are great. I definitely just would say like, hey, if you're making a three-dimensional character at a table, make sure that there's another three-dimensional character at the table.
Mhm.
And I think there's definitely a time where like, hey, when you're a three-dimensional character, you have there might be something that comes along your path and you're like, no, I have to react to this, right? I have to say, no, I have to go help the village, right? And I am going to
Right.
take on that main character syndrome. But there are also times where you can say, hey, we did my quest, and for a minute, like, now I can go and do someone else's quest because they helped me, and now I'm going to help them. Or,
Mhm.
depending on your character's motivation, they helped me, and now I'm going to help them so that they'll owe me a favor in the future, or
Yeah.
whatever thing it may
Yeah.
be, and that's totally fine. But just make sure that like it is hard to play as the only three-dimensional character at a table.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
For sure.
that can be very trapping.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that both you guys really said it well, but this idea of like knowing your table is something we will talk a ton about. We talk a lot about communication. We talk a lot about knowing the people you play with, because that saves you from the stuff. If you are walking into a table and it is what we often will call beer and pretzels D&D, where it is just like we're rolling dice and killing monsters, and you are like, oh man, I am just trying to build this fleshed out character. Like, if you've ever, I think that you guys can probably imagine this because you've probably even seen TV shows or stuff like that, where you have a three-dimensional character that you could tell the author or the player put a ton of time into like writing all this stuff out, and a zero-dimensional character right next to him who's literally just a gimmick, and they have a hard time interacting together. Like, they feel like one is taking the story way too seriously and one is not taking the story seriously enough, and they feel like they're in the wrong world together. And like, your zero-dimensional character is often really good for slapstick humor, for punchy lines, for adventure. It's your, not saying that this character is the case, but it's your Indiana Jones or your you know Batman at times. Although both those characters are three-dimensional at times, it also is just this, I'm vengeance, I am the knight, and then like run off and punch a bunch of people and have this line that you're saying, and
Yeah.
you can just be a gimmick at times. um and that is totally fine. Like, again, that was what we started by saying, was if that is how your table plays and you don't feel like this is going to fit with that, don't try and force it to, unless you talk to everyone else and they're like, no, that sounds really interesting, we want to try that.
Yeah.
As a table, we want to try and do those things, because it really can disrupt the fun that you guys are already having.
Yeah.
But, and we've talked about this a lot too, especially when you're playing at a smaller table, especially when there's only maybe, 2 or 3 player characters and 1 DM, and you guys have the space to really spotlight, one character here, one character there, and really focus on their internal story and stuff like that. And that's part of the reason we love and talk about playing at a smaller table being a really fun way to experience D&D, is you're able to have a lot more character development, and it doesn't feel as out of place often. Again, something you want to talk about with your players and with the DM when you're doing that stuff, but like, it really can create stories where you feel a lot more grounded in a part of the world. All right, I think that has been enough disclaimers. Let's get to the meat here. Let's talk about building in characters, and we're actually going to do a workshop. If you want to work right along with us, we think that would be so much fun. But we want to give you a real idea of a way that you could build a more fleshed out character. Again, keep all the other disclaimers in mind. So starting out, I'm going to ask Josiah and Elijah both this question. My first step to creating a more fleshed out character, something that you guys kind of both already do, but it's finding a desire for a character, or a goal, something that they can pursue from right out the gate. Session 1 rolls around, you start playing, and you immediately know one thing that your character is pursuing. It could be as simple as, I want X magic item, or I want gold or treasure, or I want to save my village, or I want to go get help from a powerful being. It could be anything or everything. Like, there's not really a whole lot that's off the table here, but just something to pursue. A character I just recently started playing, it wants to protect his ward. He's a bodyguard. He is in charge of protecting this, younger girl. He wants to protect her. That is his goal right out the gate. She gets captured. Now he has, the beginning of the campaign, he has motivation. He's going to go track her down. He's going to go find her and bring her back. That simple desire gives you a place to kind of start playing this character. So you both are going to create a new character. Give me their desire. What is an idea? Throw something out. What is their starting the game desire or goal?
I want to be remembered. I don't want to be forgotten. I want to create some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Legacy. I
Legacy.
need a legacy. I want to be
That
remembered.
that is remarkable, because my desire was, I was like, I would love to like write and tell the great stories of heroes in the world, and like I want to go out and find those. And so I'm like, those like tie together really well. But
They
I wrote
do.
mine down,
This
so I
this
can
would be
I
a
can
great.
confirm this was like not something that I just,
Nice.
oh, I'm jumping off of this. But hey,
Yeah.
it's
And
great.
hey,
Great.
this is a great example too of like, when you build characters together, those characters can interplay off of each other. You can have one desire being like, I want to be, glory and honor, I want to be remembered, and the other being like, I want to record the great deeds of the movers and shakers of our age. And like that, those two things together, coming together to create a story essentially and a direction. I also want to qualify this though. Not all desires are equal when it
Right.
comes to this. Not all goals are equal when it comes to this. You, for example, I'll use the one that I threw out before we started. My character wanting to protect his ward is really cool, especially when she was in danger. It gave him a ton of motivation to start the campaign out. Since then, he's gotten her back, and now traveling around, and yeah, he still wants to protect her, and that is a desire and goal, but it kind of runs out a little bit. So I actually really like both of you guys took a kind of pie in the sky shot at a goal. Sometimes it is really helpful to have your goal be really unattainable or kind of nebulous. Not always for playing the character in the first session, but for where that character goes. So you want to be remembered. That means your character wants to do something great, but it leaves it pretty open ended.
Or
You
terrible.
might, or terrible
I
if you're
will
going in a
be
different
remembered.
direction. That would be very interesting. Great doesn't have to mean good. But
I
yeah,
no longer get along with his, he wants to write the stories of heroes, though.
Yeah.
that's fair.
No, we're writing characters. I am secretly tagging along, but I'm like, hey, you should probably stop this guy the entire campaign. To like every good adventurer, I'm like, he's sort of a psychopath.
That's funny. Yeah. So this character wants to be remembered. That is a really cool kind of pie in the sky goal of like, I'm going to do something great. If that were me building this character, I would then say, what could I do session 1 to act upon this goal? What's like a mini goal that could really start me off? Something like going and getting my ward back. Something like finding, somebody to protect. So like, what's his base plan of like his first great act that is going to rocket him into stardom and being remembered? Like, he's probably got some idea of how he's going to start this.
Yeah. Elijah, you go first. I'm still
Okay.
Yeah. I think because I want to tell and write the great tales and stories, I think my character probably has already read a lot of these and kind of has found that like most of these authors have been out and about, right? They've gone and seen some great things. And so I definitely think that I set out more as a wayfarer. And I think that I will become an adventurer more by circumstances necessarily than by um, than by choice. That's not necessarily my goal. And so my journey starts, and I am like, I would like to go and see these great wonders of the world. And so I definitely picture like there's this mystical waterfall or mystical something, and I'll, I would definitely talk with my DM about like, hey, if we're playing in a desert campaign, then yeah, I'm probably not looking for a waterfall.
Well,
I'm looking for
that'd be
something
even more
different.
unique at that
Yeah,
point.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
But I would work with a DM and I'd be like, hey, I'd like to be seeking out this like natural wonder that I want to go and find. And on the road, I'll find that it's dangerous and that I have to kind of be a little bit tougher than I am in order to navigate and get there. But I think that I am seeking out natural beauty. And so I'm on a quest and on a little mission of my own to go and find this place.
Yeah, I like that. So a more immediate desire being like, hey, I want to find these heroes. I want to, write their story. I also want to see the world, and I want to see these incredible places. Like, there is this experiential aspect. I think that's really cool. And I think that we're beginning to see some layers to this character a little bit. All right, Josiah, you've had some time to cook. What do you got?
So I'm gonna spiel for a second. So when I'm sitting down to create a character, one of the things that I'm thinking through is I really want to figure out like continuity is really important to me. I want to be able to like answer any question. I like asking a why question is really important for me beforehand because I want to be able to answer a question of like, why is your character doing this? And if your answer is, I don't really know, that's just what he's doing. That is like that feels wrong to me. I'm like, I want to know the big answers. And so for me, one of the big things that I'm trying to do before session 1 is figure out like, okay, up to this point, like what are they doing when the campaign starts? What has got them here, and like where, like I'm trying to get them to a place where if we don't do anything with the campaign, this character at least was going somewhere or was doing something. So in my thoughts, I'm thinking this character has just recently had something that happened to him that pushed him to like want to be remembered. Like maybe he forgot about someone or something, or
Mhm.
some person that he thought was a super big deal, no one remembers, and so now he's like,
Mm.
I want to be remembered or something.
That's such a, like,
So
anime protagonist,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I could just imagine so many animes where it's like, "Everyone forgot about this guy. I'm not gonna be like that. I'm gonna be remembered."
yeah, exactly.
I love it.
But this is a semi-recent thing for this character, um, and he doesn't know what that means. He doesn't
Mhm,
know how people are remembered. So he's gonna go into, like, the city where there's a lot of people, and he's just gonna, like, be around and listen and hear the stories that are being told about people, and listening, what do people care about? What are people hearing? And so he's
Mm.
gonna spend his days just doing odds and end jobs around the city, just trying to hear, like, listening for what people are excited about, what are people talking about, what's the things
mhm,
that are going on. And then I think from there, he's gonna hear something and come up with some idea of, okay, to be remembered, you have to do something great.
mhm.
So I'm gonna go do something great. And he's like listening for different things that people in the city maybe are talking about, that
Mhm.
like, oh, I wish someone would do this, or oh man, this is a terrible thing, or something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And
And this
so
would be the
yeah,
perfect time if this were a session 0 and we were actually building characters, and let's say I'm DMing. This would be the perfect time for me to say, "Hey, here's a good plot hook to start the
right,
campaign with." You know,
Yeah.
like,
right.
you hear your character heard in a tavern, oh man, there's a necromancer in the swamp, and like, if somebody were to take him out, that person would never be forgotten. We'd love him forever. And this guy's like, "That's
My
me.
character
I'm
goes,
gonna go do
"Oh,
this."
no way. Tell me more about this necromancer. And you
And
said you would never forget him? Ever?
um and it's
Uh,
silly, a little tongue in cheek, but like, this truly does have the trappings of a campaign that, like, could take, grow legs and start to really move
Jack, we do expect you
and
to write
have
this
stuff.
campaign for us once this episode is over. Just an
We're
FYI.
just gonna hop in
So,
and start
uh,
playing, guys.
this is
Um,
actually the start of our new actual play.
so
Coming 2027.
necromancer in the
You
swamp,
If you wanna
guys.
do a good session 0, step 1, start a podcast,
Yeah.
and then just, like, talk about session 0, and then just go from there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so fun.
All right.
All right,
Jumping back into it.
next step here. You guys have a good desire. We will kind of round out and come back to that at some point. But I find it really helpful to step kind of towards the world at this point. Specifically choosing either a person, place, or thing in the world that you are bound to. And when I say bound to, I don't just mean connected with, like, oh, I have parents, or, but like, something that you would basically shift some of your desire for. Like, you want to be remembered, but if this thing got in the way, it would be a really hard choice, kind of idea. Or,
Mm.
like, something that you are really bound to. An example I'll sometimes give is like, you are, maybe it's an object that you are bound to, where, you want to go and adventure, you want to go do this thing, but you have to go back to the grave site of your parent every year. And that is this weird thing where it's like, I want to be remembered, but I can't miss this anniversary too. And that's
Mm.
weird. It feels like it maybe wouldn't fit with D&D, but as you kind of play this character, you see it's like, oh no, like, they're, even though that maybe doesn't interact with the world, the DM, first of all, could draw on that if you wanted. But also there's this place where, like, you as a character are a little bit more fleshed out. There are things that combat your desire at times. Like, I want to go do great things, but I can't leave my hometown too far because I have to come back to this every day. Or a sick mother, or, a something that you're kind of bound to in that sense. Another idea maybe is you have somebody that you've fallen in love with, somebody that you hate, somebody that you are bound and determined to destroy their life at all costs. Something though that would conflict with your main desire is often great, but sometimes it doesn't need to be totally obvious how those two things would conflict. Sometimes that comes out as the campaign goes on, but it's almost a secondary desire that ties you to the world. It makes your character feel like they're not just a character with a desire, but a character in this world with a desire. All right, Any initial thoughts from you guys? Person, place, or thing that you are tied to in this world?
I've got a few. Okay, so first off, um, I think my parents are nobodies. No one knows
Mm,
them. No one remembers them. So I think that just like automatically, I think that deepens my desire to not be forgotten because I'm
totally.
already thinking my parents are nobodies, but I'm not really tied to them because I don't even respect them. They haven't done anything worth remembering. They're nobodies. I think there was a hero or some like folk legend
Mm,
who I knew uh and who like was super nice to me and before he left on a big journey he gave me his hat and he
mm,
said, "Here's looking at you, kid," and then went off and died and now nobody remembers him.
mm.
And so this hat that I have is like the last thing that I have of him,
I love
and
it.
and I'm shocked that no one else remembers this, but I'm tied to this hat, and I think eventually, my character will learn to realize that he might have to give up. He has to be remembered. Maybe it's more important that in order for the hero to be remembered, he has to be forgotten. Yeah, well,
Oh,
anyway,
interesting,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Anyway,
you're jumping ahead a little bit, but I like the
yeah.
idea. You have this physical
I'm running
hat that
there.
you wear. Still really leaning into the anime protagonist. I'm like
Yeah,
thinking
oh,
of
for
so
sure.
many of them who are like, I wear my dad's hat because that's who I'm
Oh,
gonna.
yeah, I
Yeah,
guess I guess that's Luffy, huh? Never mind.
But
yeah.
but
No,
it's
I
but it's
love it.
Still
definitely
good.
It's a
but
good.
it's
It's
not
a
his
good.
dad's because this is not a
Not his dad.
nobody's hat. Like this is a
That's right.
somebody's
It's
hat.
not his dad's
Somebody's
hat.
hat.
No, but
Watch out, it's
like
exactly Luffy. He wears
Luffy's a good
Oh no.
character. He lasted over 1,000 episodes. So
I
like,
I
guess.
mean, yeah. So we got a
And
lot
um
of
not very
places we can
far
go.
into One
And here's
Piece.
the thing:
Alright.
if we try to follow that word for word verbatim, and we're like we're gonna go on the One Piece adventure, I
I know I make
promise
this a
you
pirate
it will
campaign
derail in the next like
It will look
3 sessions.
very
so
different.
quickly.
Oh,
So
I
we'll
did
be like,
earlier say that my only background that I had was I was a pirate. I've
It's
accidentally
just
oh
become
man,
Luffy.
alright.
oh
Oh
man,
man.
this is crazy.
Yeah, that's so funny. All right, I actually really like the hat. I think that's a great idea, and I think it'd be interesting too. As a DM, my thoughts are turning, and I go, I don't know if that guy's going to be dead. Maybe everyone just thinks he's dead, and maybe there will be a point where this guy comes back, and there could be some really cool interactions, especially if his world philosophy differs from yours significantly. You know,
Mhm.
At Metro Man from Megamind, he's just a nobody now,
It-
and it ruins my whole image of him. He's like,
He's
"Well,
like,
who are
I
you?"
actually faded into
yeah,
obscurity on purpose,
yeah.
and it's like,
Or it's
what?
so much or it's like it's more about the action itself than the man who did it. Like my
Mm,
action still stands even though the man has been forgotten, and your
that was
character's
deep.
like,
That
no,
was
it's
deep.
about me being remembered, and the clash of views there as your hero turns out to be different from you in that area. All right, let's hear from you, Elijah. What is something your character would be bound to?
I think I'm bound to a place. I am a librarian. I think that like
Mm,
I keep this library and it is like a collection of kind of more local history. And
mm,
so I know that like no one else is going to really keep this up the way to my standards. I think
mhm.
that I am very much very particular about this how this is all kept, and I take a lot of pride in it. And so like I feel very much like yeah, if I want to tell these great stories, but I can't venture too far, um,
Mm.
lest something happened to this place that means so much to me.
Yeah.
I think that really works
Mm.
well.
Yeah, for sure. And that is one, definitely one that you would want to talk to your DM about, because especially if your DM's like, oh, I really wanted you guys to leave this town, and
Yeah,
maybe that might be something you have to work out within the first few sessions together.
absolutely.
But I really do like it. It does create for a lot of drama, and I feel like that is often kind of one of the better ways to do the reluctant hero. Like Bilbo doesn't not want to do anything. He has two desires. He wants to go on an adventure. There is a part of him that wants to do that. There's also a part of him that knows that it's frowned upon by society and that he'd be more comfortable at home. And
Yeah.
he wars with that desire in the first couple of chapters. And then the whole rest of the book is him choosing this one desire and going after it. And there might be a place where your character has a lot of development and growth just from warring with that, even in the first few sessions.
Yeah.
And maybe moving on and choosing one of those desires for the sake of the plot and the adventure and everything else. But I'd still love that desire. Like, that is the good way, even in kind of D&D, to do it. Instead of being like, oh, my character is averse to adventure, saying, no, my character wants to adventure, but there's something holding him back.
Yeah.
And even for Luke Skywalker, he wants to adventure, but his aunt and uncle are here and he can't really just abandon them. What does George Lucas do? He kills his aunt and uncle. You could burn down the library. That sucks. The character, I know,
Not
you don't
my library.
want that. But at the same time, that frees this character to go on adventure and gives them a story and feelings and emotions already that will affect and help them to behave in a more realistic way. You've lost your library. So
Now you have
both
to
of those.
gather all the stories from
Or you
local
have to like
legend.
rewrite these. You have to like track
Mm.
down the people from the library that wrote down certain parts of these and have them re-script them. Stuff like that.
Or I'm
like
seeking magic to return everything back to the way
some
that it
sort
You
of
go
like
back in
time
time.
Yeah,
that would be
time
so
magic.
cool.
Or even just like a more powerful version of mending kind of thing.
Oh,
of
yeah.
like
I
even
like
just to
it,
put
Oh.
it back together how
Yeah.
it was. Any of those things, I'm super happy. Like as a character,
I mean, a
Fascinating.
wish spell.
devastated by the fact that this library might burn down, and I think that it could even be like a very much a point of contention, and like I won't talk about it, or I will talk about it too much at times, and like kind of bounce between those. I
It's
feel
a
like I can.
secret library.
I know, not a
Yeah.
secret library, but like
No, but that I love
the points.
both of those characters have just like I'm seeing them round out just a little bit more as we talk about this stuff. I do want to move on, and I think this one is a really important thing. And I'm gonna give a short anecdote at the beginning. I just heard somebody talk about this online, and I thought it was really fascinating. They were like, give your character a real world philosophy. And it's like, give them maybe, like nihilism. They believe that nothing matters, but because that will be challenged at times. Or utilitarianism, where, the end justifies the means, because that will be challenged at times while you play. Because none of these philosophies are perfect. They explain parts of life, they work at times, but they don't work at others. And when you try to apply them holistically, you run into these problems, and they're really fun to grapple with. And this is kind of similar to that. But I want you to choose something that they believe in. Maybe it is the ends justify the means. A statement like that. Maybe it is survival of the fittest. Maybe it is only being remembered. You kind of already have a little bit of that, but like only being remembered matters. Like, because that could lead your character down specific roads of maybe becoming a little more evil, justifying certain actions that they maybe wouldn't have. But like, I try and bring it down to one singular value. Maybe it's like working hard is the only thing that matters, or being tough is the only thing that matters. So yeah, any ideas on what you believe there?
Yeah, I think for me, as I like try to think through some of these philosophies, I think it's definitely tied to the remembering thing. I'm trying to figure out like if there's a deeper level than
Mhm.
just being remembered is a good thing, or something. I almost feel like it's something along the lines of
Sometimes too it can be interesting to have it contradict your thing. Like being
like
remembered's all that matters is kind of your goal already. It might be interesting to be like, taking care of your family is super important, and now you have a warring
interesting,
desire and belief inside of you.
sure,
um so it doesn't always have to be exactly in the same direction that you're
yeah,
already headed. In fact, it can be more interesting when it's not in that direction, just something you kind of believe about the world. Sometimes it's interesting to have it tangentially related, where it's like, oh, I want to be remembered, I also believe that rules and laws exist for a reason, you know, and they ought to be followed. And it's like, there are going to be places where these two things conflict, and what will you do in those areas? Um, all right, sorry, I interrupted you there, but I thought that might clarify some
I know
things.
you've thrown me in different directions now. I think, yeah, interesting. I think that my character believes uh how people see you, or like people's view, or like how the culture thinks is what reality is. It's like
Hmm.
defined by perception.
Perception. Yeah, that's
So it's
interesting.
like creates this idea where it's like who you are remembered as is who you were, regardless
Hmm.
of who you think you were, or regardless of
Yeah.
how, like, what
Oh,
you did in
that's
the world.
good.
It's all about how people view you.
Oh, as a DM, I could do so much with that. That is good. I love that. I even like kind of putting it down, to just like perception dictates kind of reality. Like the way others perceive me dictates what's real. And so, you're trying to live up to make this
Right.
perception of yourself and others. Like that's fascinating. I really
Yeah.
like that. All right, Elijah, do you
The
have anything? Oh,
Yeah.
what were you going to say?
No, go
the
ahead.
hat that I'm wearing is a hat of disguise, and so I'm trying to
I,
it's actually
it's a
yeah,
hat of
I'm
billowing.
changing
Your hat
My
billows all the time.
if people
oh my
perceive me
goodness.
as looking attractive, then I am attractive. It does not matter what I normally look like. It's all perception.
Nice.
Oh, that's fascinating. All right, Elijah. Yeah, what are you thinking along the lines of something this character would believe in that may even contradict or be tangentially kind of pulling against your
Yeah.
major desire?
I was like really thinking about it, and I want to believe really firmly in destiny. And it's like we're
Hmm.
like destined for these great things. And so like I
Yeah.
feel like certain people are kind of destined for heroism, and so like I want to
Hmm.
find those people. But as far as like a
Oh.
philosophy goes, I want to believe that the more things change, the more they stay the same, and that like there isn't any great change that actually ever happens to people, and so like
Hmm.
pursuing something like that isn't worthwhile. And
Oh.
so I think as a librarian, I'm like, I want to tell these great stories, but it like I almost feel like my desire, like even though I do want this, might just be a waste of time. And so
Hmm.
there's a place where burning that library is now like, well, things have definitely changed, and like how
Yeah.
does this return to normalcy?
Yeah.
And to be proven wrong in that belief would be really fun, but also to like kind of be proven right of like, yeah, I actually did have a destiny to do something completely different than what I realized.
Hmm.
And so like
Yeah.
really having to deal with like what is change, what is, static, and
Yeah.
Right.
um
And maybe
just
even,
the paradox of the theory of
yeah,
change.
for sure. And I love that idea too. Like as a DM, I'm sitting here going, I burn your library down to kind of force you into adventure. And
Sure.
you like reject that, pretty early on, that sentiment of like, oh, no, things do change. And maybe, by the end of the story, you're coming back to a library you've rebuilt and you're like, oh, maybe there is a place where things stay the
Now
same.
and now I'm retiring
Like,
as a librarian,
Yeah.
like I
or
always
even
dreamed I'd do.
going on the journey of like realizing, yes, things around us change, but our internal state can be more consistent.
Mm,
Like, there are different things that I could see
yeah.
your character learning as his worldview
Or
has to
even the
shift.
opposite of like, hey, our circumstances don't really change, but who we are might change greatly.
Hmm.
Um,
For
Well,
sure.
which are both
and it's
super fun.
Both really fun.
it's interesting that as well that you're like uh Destiny's kind of already going in its different, or like specific direction. And your, like, core desire is not to change anything, it's to actually record what's happening.
Yes.
Mm.
So it's very, very thematic in
Yeah.
this, like, "Oh, I'm just writing down what was destined to happen anyways, because
Yeah.
somebody's gotta do it," you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
No,
I
there's a
almost
lot
feel
there that's really cool.
as I'm thinking of how I'll role play this character, it's like, well, I have to kind of prove to other people like you're always destined for this. And like, whether that's like I just see the marker of heroism in this person and it's like everyone knew they were always destined for greatness.
Mm.
Which I think makes me following your character super fun of like
Mhm.
because like no offense, in my character's opinion, you're a nobody, and therefore you're not destined for great things.
Mhm.
And so the
Interesting, yeah.
Yes.
conflict there of like, um,
Yep.
he's
Oh,
a
yeah.
great hero
Like,
now, and like
both of
that
you
you
guys,
can
yeah.
change my worldview so drastically because it's like
Yeah.
no, like he's going out and doing the most. Like this is a big deal. I think is really fun.
Mm.
How dare you
Yeah, I
say
know.
I am a nobody? That is your perspective of me needs to change immediately.
No, but I think that's so fascinating too of like Elijah's character thinking that both you guys are going to look for a great man and Josiah's character being like I'm going to be that great man,
I am already.
or I
Yeah.
am that great man. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And pursuing that. That's so fun. All right, we've already done a lot of work in this direction because it kind of naturally comes out as we go. But the final step is needs to be done cautiously, but it is holding somewhat open-handedly, but still speculating upon what could be. We know these characters' wants. What could be their needs? And so again,
Yeah.
we're using this writing term here. We know that Josiah's character wants to be remembered. We know that Elijah's character wants to find and record the actions of a great man or great things in the world. Um, and also has a secondary desire, both of them do, in pursuing those goals. What is maybe a way that they could grow or become healthier when they realize that yes, they want this, but that's not actually what they need? And again, hold these with open hands, but I feel like speculating upon this gives you ideas of where your character could go. And when you communicate those with the DM, that gives him the ability to try and set you up for those things. And sometimes those setups, because D&D is such a cool thing, don't work in the way you think it is. Sometimes the DM feels like, oh, I'm giving you a layup for you to, be able to turn this corner and believe something new, and the dice go against you during that time, and you end up failing where the DM thought you were going to succeed, and your philosophy takes a left turn, and
Yeah.
it's like your character goes in a different direction. So you got to hold these with open hands because D&D isn't fully in your control.
Yeah.
But where could
I
you see these characters going?
I have this really so I wrote this down a little bit prematurely, but like I said earlier, I really like giving my characters flaws. And so the flaw of my character that I had already come up with, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but
Mm-hmm.
is that I am a coward. And I need to feel safe and to be safe. And so I don't rush into conflict. I don't rush into combat. Um, but like I very much thought of it as like, hey, if we were attacked by goblins on the road, I would be like, sure, take my money, please, just don't hurt me. um
Mm.
and that like I need to feel safe and unharmed, but if they're going to harm me, then I would obviously try to defend myself because I don't want to be hurt, I want to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that yeah, that need kind of came from like something that is kind of a flaw from a D&D perspective of like, yeah, I need to be safe, um, because I'm afraid of fighting. I'm afraid of being
Mm.
hurt and harmed, in any way. And so I think that like really like for me kind of like bottomed out my character of like, okay, so like why so what's the big deal? And it's like, well, yeah, I'm a librarian first. And so like yeah, I'm so glad that my library burned down. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden I'm just going to jump to being an adventurer, in 2 seconds. I think that will be like a okay, sure, I'll go try to do this while I figure out what to do about my library, and then
Hmm.
that allows for a lot of growth, that I can overcome some of that fear, um, while also like really like feeling a great need for safety and security, and not wanting to adventure for the rest of my life, not wanting to be
Yeah.
out on the road. I think that sounds very fun, and it does kind of. I notice that if Josiah is playing Luffy, then I am probably actually playing Bilbo. Very much of like, I just want to stay
Hmm.
at home. I'm very afraid
Yeah.
of anything bad happening to me, and like I enjoy all of the things that I have at home, and that's very nice for me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, for sure. Do you mind if I maybe ask a clarifying question? Because
Yeah,
specifically, I'm sitting here, and more as I've asked these questions of you guys, I felt more and more like the DM of this campaign, which I think is fairly natural as you guys are both
sure.
designing characters. But for me as a DM sitting in this place, I was like, ooh, I really felt like I had ways to kind of push and pull your character. And I felt like this actually kind of cut me off at the knees a little bit with it.
Okay.
Specifically of being like, hey, I actually am really resistant to, like, I'm cowardly. And there was this place where I was like, oh man, now if I burn down your library, you will want to go on an adventure. Like, but you were kind of like, I don't know if he'd even want to go on an adventure. He might just have to do it out of necessity. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
but that
now I'm
also
gonna
could.
be like really having to like pull your teeth to
Yeah,
get you to go.
but that, I think you can also then like, someone burned down my library. It wasn't just an accident. And
Yeah.
so I'm now fleeing where I was from, and I want to go back. And that, like,
Hmm.
it might shift where my wants and needs are and the things that I'm tied to a little bit. But I think that that's still all kind of like coalesced together. And as a
Hmm.
player, I want to
Yeah.
play a campaign that you're going to run, right? And so
Yeah.
if I'm
Totally.
like, oh, I'm cowardly, then yeah, I'm currently
Hmm.
running away from the city, the
Hmm.
village that I'm from, or
Yeah.
whatnot.
And I wasn't going to say don't do that. My question was going to manifest as like, are you how does cowardly fit with your desire to record the great stories of people? Because what we'd kind of talked about before
Yeah.
was you have this desire to go out, we'd even originally said there's somewhere you want to kind of travel to. You have the
Yes.
desire to record the great stories of people. Um, but then you also have a bit of a homebody, like, oh, but I'm attached to my library. I couldn't leave my library. And so how does cowardly fit with your primary desire?
Yeah.
Was more what I was going to ask, because as a DM, that would be a place where I was
Yeah.
struggling to
I
connect
think
those two.
it's sheer naivety. I am completely unaware that, like, oh, in order to like go and record these great stories, like, I will have to be in danger. I will have to be
Hmm.
near this, or I might believe that I can just go sit in a tavern, but I'll miss out on some of the details, and I think that would be something that, like, I I just am unaware of the situation that I'm in. I'm unaware of the
Kind of how those
dangers
are
and things. Yeah.
paradoxical.
Your
Yeah.
character is mad. It like, his multi-ability
Yeah.
dependent. It, like, which is unhelpful, but,
Yeah.
like, your character doesn't realize, but they have, like, too many things that they want and are trying to accomplish at the same time,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and pretty quickly on, they're gonna realize, I cannot have
Yeah.
Yeah.
everything that I want.
Yes.
I
Hmm.
cannot be at home, write a good story, be safe, explore everything new. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
cannot do all
And,
of these things, and
and
very
I,
quickly on, it's
I'm
gonna
I'm
Yeah.
very okay with that. Like, for a character,
Hmm.
that's very fun because I can, in some ways, I
Yeah.
can kind of just switch between those, and like,
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah.
when I'll say when one soon, when one thing kind of wraps up, when one thing kind of comes to a close, I can go, oh, well, now that that's done, I'd like to go home. And it's like, what? You're done? And it's like, yeah, I'm happy to go
Hmm.
home now. And
Yeah.
everyone else is like, dude, we just found out that the Dark Lord, like, has 7 gems that we need to go and destroy. And it's like, yeah, and we'll let someone know about that. And it's like, no, like, you're responsible now. And I think
Hmm.
that could be very fun.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
this character has a lot of plot hooks, and yes, those things are conflicting. And I think that it will be very fun to learn kind of
Hmm.
through suffering. how those things kind
Yeah,
of conflict.
for sure. I do really like this character, and I do really see there being a ton of potential with having a decent amount of conflicting points of view inside of yourself. And in a lot of ways, I think this segues into, we're talking about building characters. I think part of what really makes them feel real is this idea of cognitive dissonance. Like in us, we have things that contradict and we don't realize it. And then we don't typically realize it until they come into conflict with each other. And then we are stuck at a place where we have to trade one worldview for another. We say, hey, the one I was working with clearly isn't right. Like, something's got to give here. I can't both want to go see these great things and be a coward that wants to stay at home, or wants to avoid combat. I can't follow a great man and never want to be in danger. Like those two things are not compatible. And so one of them has to win. Um, and that is often how we sometimes come to periods of growth in our own life, as we see like, oh wow, I want this and I want this, and they aren't compatible. And so I have to figure out something new. And I think that would be really fascinating. And again, like, I will say this as a DM, I love your character, Elijah. It scares me if you choose the cowardly route in the end. Like, if you're like, I'm afraid and I want to go do these great things, I'm going to go home. There's a place where I'd be like, okay, Elijah, as your DM, and let's have an interpersonal conversation. I don't know how to get your character to stay here and do this. Like,
Yeah.
I want him to keep going, and I love what you're doing with it, but I don't know how to get those two together. And I bring that up not because that would be a problem; it may not, but honestly, because we're a podcast talking about D&D stuff, and we've talked about this stuff in the past, and
Yeah.
so I want to be like, hey, guys, here's an application for stuff we've kind of talked about pie in the sky that may happen at some point.
Yeah.
Um, and
There's no home to go back to. The
Yeah.
way back is more dangerous than the way forward.
and those are things that your player then
Yeah.
could suggest to you of like, I think this is how my character could be motivated
Yeah.
here. And Elijah kind of already did that for me. And that's why he didn't make any mistakes there. He has a really great character at the end of all this. But I, as a DM, might need reminded of how to motivate his character at
Yeah.
times.
And I also think that, like, for my character that I've kind of drawn up here, like, because I believe so strongly in destiny, someone
Mm,
telling me that I am destined for heroism and
Right.
yeah.
I have this marker of that I really believe in, it's like, well, now I like have to kind of overcome my cowardliness because of
Mm,
this, right? Or
yeah.
maybe
Yep.
someone like, I believe that I'm destined to be a coward because I am a coward, and that's just
Mm,
it's not, nothing will ever change that. And it's like someone stepping in and saying you're destined for greatness, go. And I'm like, uh okay, I don't feel this, and to get
mm,
to deal with that conflict, I think could be
yeah,
super fun. And yeah, just
for
to have
sure.
like a ton of different options. I feel like this character, like, whatever the DM throws at me, I can be like, okay, I have a motivation to stay or to leave. And so if I ever get tired of this character, I can kind of come to my DM and be like, hey, Jack,
Yeah.
I'm kind of over him. I would really like to play someone new. I think that he really is going to back out, and like he's going to be
Go
like,
home.
I want to go
Yeah.
home. Which I think is fun. I think that's something
Yeah.
that I've never put in a character before. Of like, yeah, they have a really good reason to like just leave and go home.
Hmm.
Which I think could
Wow.
be a ton of fun.
For sure. All right.
Everyone gives up. Oh man, that's like
We got to wrap
Nicodemus
up
in
here soon.
in the seeds of one of the
um,
chosen.
Oh
You know,
no.
but we have
like
one more. We got
yeah,
one
sorry.
more thing here, Josiah.
Yeah,
Want, need. What is a way that you could see your character
yeah.
developing as he goes on?
Digging into like psychology and stuff. I think realistically, what this get like this my character just wants control. He's
Mm,
trying to control what people like how people view him because he believes that people's views, people's perspective is what is reality. And I think he's going to kind of have to realize at some point that he can't control the way that people view him.
mm,
Um I think what he needs is some self-assuredness. He needs to come to the realization that um that who he thinks he is good enough.
Mm,
Um, he kind of needs uh he needs to be assured that he is enough
Mm.
based off of who he is, not
Yeah.
off of how other people see him.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he almost needs to come to this point where, yeah, either someone is assuring him, or like he gets to where, or everything is completely out of his control,
Mm.
and he determines that I can't do it. I can't control it. I'm
Mm.
not the one that is gonna do
Yeah.
everything. You know?
Give me one practical example of how you could see this character kind of breaking in that sense and like finally coming to see that being different.
Yeah, I think it is gonna come down to conflicting desires and him making a choice that 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 means he does not have he is not remembered,
Hmm.
you know what I mean, like it's
Yeah.
or like he has to make a choice where he is ignoring how people view him. It's
Yeah.
like in order for the greater good or whatever other thing he decides is more important, like he has to give up being remembered, and then when he makes that decision, he says, "You know what? I'm making this, 1, because it's more important, and 2, because it doesn't it does like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
be okay with myself." You know, so
For sure.
it's like,
Man, this would be such an interesting
yeah.
campaign to throw a romance in with, like your
Oh, yeah.
character having a romance with somebody else and like
aw.
be having to give up some of their perception that other people see them because their desire for
Yep.
another person. Like that would be really interesting.
I
Sorry.
think it's really important, never plan for a romance with your characters, because that's how it happens in real life too. You have to figure out romance as you go.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Sure.
Anyways.
Okay. Um
That was excellently
anyway,
said.
Thank you.
I think that this was honestly a fantastic exercise. You guys both did great. I honestly feel like with a little bit of prep work on my side, we could start running that as a campaign. And that's cool. I feel like both you guys built well fleshed out characters and gave me ideas of where I could run
Yeah.
with those
Please note,
as a DM.
neither of us have classes.
No,
or-
and,
We have no mechanics
yeah,
figured out
and,
whatsoever.
and I think that is the one thing that I will say. Hopefully, you did like work alongside us. Maybe as you were listening to this, you were like, "I really like this idea. I steal it. Please steal
Yeah, oh
it.
yeah,
Take
sure.
everything that you just heard, a quarter of what you just heard. Feel free to rip it right off and
Hmm.
take that and run with a character."
Yeah.
This
And there
is
are whole YouTube channels out there that are just giving ideas. So if you want to use our ideas, go for it. No one
yeah,
will ever know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
No.
this was very fun, and like I will say, like, we made characters kind of Jack's way. This is not how I would start you building a character,
Yeah.
which I think is super fun as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we definitely will talk more about characters in the future, but I think
For sure.
we should do practical application of each of us telling you how to build characters. I think
Oh,
that
I
could
don't
be
even
I
know
do
how
so
to
think
much
that would
do
be
it
fun.
my
fun to
way.
kind of
Um,
try it different ways for sure.
Can
And
yeah.
I think
everybody open up your player's handbook and just look around for 45 minutes?
We might do that
yeah,
before we start the recording of like, all right,
Uh,
Josiah gave us some
for
instructions
sure.
and
Here's how
then
we
we'll jump
reported back.
in.
For sure.
Uh,
I wanted to say here at the very end, we've already gone kind of long, but I definitely imagine Elijah as a bard and Josiah as a fighter. But that also, was like as you
Champion
guys were
fighter for
kind of
sure.
like talking through it, I was like, oh yeah, that those images just kind of, was what I was thinking there. Um,
College bard.
yeah, or
College
like a lore bard or something
lore
like
bard.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Either way, I love this. This was super fun. I will just kind of close by saying you do not need to do it this way to have fun. I want to reiterate, we started with a pretty big disclaimer because we are giving you a way to build characters and have fun. And as they just even said, that is not their way to do it. That is kind of my way and the way that I work through some of these things. I really enjoy building characters. I really enjoy the mechanics, and the part that I really want to focus on when I'm sitting down in session 0 is the story. Like I often will have chassis I could plug into these characters and be like, this, class really fits well with this character archetype. But a big part of playing the game is kind of experiencing the story at the table and having motivations and knowing how you'd act in certain areas. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Tales About the Table. And as always, we don't have all the answers, but this is how we like to play D&D. So I hope you had fun. See you next time.